Hello.
Go to DYCD.
DYCD, Barbershop Talk.
Barbershop Talk.
Fatherhood matters. Diverse. Hey yo, these is barbershop talks where the fathers pop off. Brag about relationships and argue about sports. Every topic's a favorite, is how we plot course toward changes. It all begins with dialogue and patience. Barbershop talk, so let's chop it up, boss. Barbershop talk, so let's chop it up, boss. Barbershop talk, so let's chop it up, boss. Chop it up, boss. Chop it up, boss. It's barbershop talk, so let's chop it up, boss. It's barbershop talk, so let's chop it up, boss. It's barbershop talk, so let's chop it up, boss. Chop it up, boss. Chop it up, boss. Barbershop talks. DYCD Barbershop Talks, hosted by L. Hoffa, Scott Leach, Jerry Hippolyte, and Mike Bobbitt. Yeah.
Good evening, everyone. We are back here in the barbershop chopping it up with myself, Scott Leach, and today we have Jerry Hippolyte, and we have Mike is going to join us shortly. So, Jerry, how's been your day?
And the day's been good so far. We are at Wednesday. That means we're closer to Friday, and it's a feel-good Sunday with the sun coming out, so I'm excited.
Great. And I guess people are wondering why our barbershop background has changed today. We are celebrating with our ladies around the world, the Denim Day theme, because we are in support. We got their back. No means no. And we want as men to understand that when our women need our help, we need to be there. We need to be advocates for them. We need to step up and show that we care about them. We love them. We support them. And anything that could happen to them, we got their back. We believe in them. We hear in them. And it's just a wonderful thing. Today, I was actually at Foley Square and I saw, the rally I was at, and it was really exciting to me because we saw a lot of men at the rally supporting this important conversation we're going to have today. So it was really great to me. I don't know, how'd you spend your Denim Day so far?
No, I did the same thing. I actually stepped out to lunch and, we're right across the street from City Hall, and you just saw the energy that is out there to bring that level of awareness to Denim Day and what that actually means. And just for all our viewers out there, so everyone understands really the backstory, the history of Denim Day. This was something that really started in Italy in 1992 with an 18-year-old girl that got raped by a 45-year-old driving instructor. And what happened was, even though he was sentenced and went to jail, he was able to appeal it and actually get released because he said that because she had jeans and was able to remove them, that became the jeans alibi. It came a big uproar within the Italian parliament, and that really started what we know now as Denim Day, and really brought up a big voice to what that actually means. But what you were saying, no means no. And how do we really push that? That's why I love the energy that was out there, similar to what you were saying, that men were leading that charge. So I just wanted to give y'all a little backstory on how it even started, and just why it's so powerful and meaningful to this day right now.
Definitely, man. And once again, and it's funny because in any time that I'm going to say that if you're a girl dad like Jerry and I are, it means a lot more to us also. Because let me tell you, as being a girl dad, there are going to be some real problems. Okay, so we're just calling it real. And once again, but it's part of our culture as men that we have to lead the conversation, lead the charge of changing the narrative of how we view women and how we view our women that we are looking for, that we love and we care about and we want to support, because you never know, one day it could be your sister, your mother, your daughter, and but it starts with us. That as we as men have to change the narrative, and we have some experts on tonight who are going to help us get better understood about the narrative, talking about consent and talking about Denim Day and sexual assault awareness. And we have some young people on that we wanted to talk also. But first, I want to bring in two great experts, and with their organization is a Call to Men. They actually are big advocates across the world. They go around and have conversations about this. So first, I'm going to bring on Ricky Houston. Ricky, how you doing?
Hey, Scott, great to be with you. Also, Jerry, great to be with you today.
So tell us a little about yourself and how you got started in the Call to Men. I'm going to bring your co-partner on in a second.
I actually got started with I'm Ricky Houston. I'm from North Carolina. I'm a country boy, but I've been with the Call to Men now about 15 years, and just really heard about the organization, how they engage men, and that was something I never heard before. Tony Porter, our CEO, I was inspired when he said if women could have ended the violence, they would have done it a long time ago. It's going to take men holding other men accountable, men working together alongside of women to end this violence. So seeing our role, and so that really, and talking about the man box, which I'll talk about a little bit later on, but that really, really resonated with me. And also, like you, I'm a girl dad too. Actually, my daughter is, is an adult woman now, but I see the value, see the importance that our role as men, with this issue about ending sexual violence.
I never forget when we did this in the past, and Ted talked about taking some old boots of his and put in front of his daughter's house. When my daughter moved out, I did the same thing.
I remember that story. Yeah.
So maybe we can share that story with you a little bit later. But I also want to bring in our next co-host for today, who's coming all the way from across the country in Arizona, who's out here to help us lead this conversation. Chucho, how you doing, man? Talk to me.
Hello, everyone. Hello, beautiful people. Toca Chucho. And I'm just really happy to be here. And I'm really just feeling grateful for the opportunity to have this conversation, because unfortunately it's necessary, right, to bring awareness. And I feel, just appreciative of the space and just the work that we get to do with the Call to Men.
Thanks, man. And we also have our own right here in New York City, our Commissioner, Hannah. How do you do, Hannah? Come on and talk to us, Hannah. Thank you for being with us.
Hey, Scott. Happy Denim Day, everybody. It's a big day for us here at the mayor's office, and particularly where I work, which is the Office to End Domestic and Gender-Based Violence. And the most important thing about these kinds of campaigns is to basically focus all of our attention on young people like folks here. So I'm so glad to be hearing your thoughts on the topic, but also to answer questions and have a dialogue, because that's where we're going to really make a change.
So Hannah, I'm going to start with you, but I'm going to get to Ricky, because Ricky has some video and stuff to show us. But so Hannah, what is from your office that you really, really want us as men to really kind of dig down, and where are we still missing the mark, that we can at least for this conversation we can help get people to dig in a little bit deeper, if there's a space that we can help and talk a little bit deeper about, so we can help these young men becoming outstanding men.
Yeah, I mean, I think that engaging men and boys in this work is really important. I think acknowledging that men and boys and people of all gender identities and sexual orientations experience sexual violence is also really important, and to normalize that, because I think that and Chucho and Ricky are going to be able to talk about this with a lot more expertise than me, because the Call to Men does a lot of work on this. But when we're thinking about masculinity and toxic masculinity, that often also shuts out the voices of survivors who do identify as men. So I think that's an important piece of it. And I think that also has the benefit of us talking about this as an issue that impacts us all, which at my office and in the work that I've been doing, that's really important part of what we're doing, which is to create programming, but also to implement outreach efforts that are as inclusive as they can be. And I think also But to that point, we also know that rape culture and other really ingrained societal mindsets and beliefs perpetuate violence, but also normalize it. So I think talking about that and being open about it, and then really simply, it's not simple, but it sounds simple. One of the things that we put in the chat was a program that we created last year called the ABCs of Healthy Relationships, because again, if we want to go deep, we need to actually go earlier. So we really need to start to have conversations with all young people about consent in an age appropriate way out of the gate, so that we're creating, we're helping to support and build up young people in our communities who are, have boundaries with their family members and with their friends, and they know what consent means, not necessarily in like an intimate situation, but just in general. And what we know is that social emotional learning programs, which, there's so many more things happening in schools to support the mental health and the social and emotional growth of young people, that's part of this as well. So we're creating protective factors, and we're helping young people create better dynamics with their peers, with their teachers, with their communities, with their families, that down the road, they will be less likely to be harmed and to cause harm, which is another really important piece of the puzzle, which we can talk about today too at some point, I hope, which is also making sure that our responses are, how are we engaging with people who have been harmed, but also people who have caused harm, and how we can do a better job of supporting those people and to see their ability to change and make a difference.
And I want to also just preference the group and everybody who's on that if there's something that triggers you, please reach out for help. Find immediate help. I get off this line right now and seek out help. Hannah, I thought I heard today that there's a 1-800 number that people can call. Can you give that to me right now? Because before we get started, I want to make sure that we get that out front.
The city's hotline number that anybody can reach out to is 1-800-621-HOPE. And I would say two other things on that. One is that I think for almost all people, we used to say it was for young people, looking at the young people, but everybody's on their phone, everybody's texting, and a lot of people just want to get to a resource. That we have created a web-based portal called NYC Hope that anybody can access, that has a searchable database for local resources, but also a way to educate ourselves about domestic and gender-based violence. So if you just Google NYC Hope, you'll see it. And then also in New York City, another important resource is NYC Well, which is, I'll get the number because it's not in my head right now, but it's, for anybody experiencing any kind of trouble or crisis who wants to chat or talk on the phone with somebody, it's available 24 hours a day for anybody in New York City. So I'll put that in the chat as well.
And we'll get it over to our YouTube channel, so those in the YouTube world can actually see those hotline numbers and those links, because we really want you to not suffer alone, and we want you to be able to be healed. And this is what this conversation is about, is that hopefully healing. I also heard today, and Hannah, I want to make sure, or Chucho or Rick, I want to make sure I get the numbers right. I heard today someone say that 1 out of every 6 women have been sexually assaulted in some way, shape, or fashion, and 1 out of 10 men have been sexually assaulted in some fashion. And I know in today's society that you love who you love, and we're not going to say that, but we want to be respectful of whoever you're with, of their boundaries. And what is the boundaries? And that you are very, 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 very clear where people's boundaries are. Just because what they start doesn't mean the boundaries continue. So I know, Rick, I'm gonna come to you because you have some awesome information to share with us about this topic, and I think you have some slides that you want to bring up too. So Rick, I'm gonna turn it over to you.
Thanks, Scott, and really appreciate being here today. And Chucho and I are going to really get into a conversation, share a couple of slides about who we are at A Call to Men, about, as I was saying earlier, about our role as men, because we think about the violence. Most of the violence is perpetrated by men. And so our work here at A Call to Men is engaging men to end men's violence against women. So I just want to put this up for a few minutes and share this with you. But to first of all, just kind of have a discussion today. So I'm glad to see the youth group as well, but I'm glad to see this panel as we talk about Denim Day today and our role. But I want to share a video with you.
As men, we have unwritten rules and agreements, unnegotiated deals and codes of silence that other men come to expect from us. This collectively defines many aspects of our manhood. I remember asking a 12-year-old boy, a football player, so how would you feel if your coach told you in front of all the other players that you're playing like a girl? I thought he would say I'd be mad, I'd be angry, I'd be sad, but no, the boy told me it would destroy me. I said, wow. If it would destroy him being told that he's playing like a girl, what are we as men teaching him about girls? If we continue to treat women and girls as if they are of less value, the property of men and sexual objects, we continue to maintain a culture that reinforces discrimination and abuse towards them.
It is important to rethink and reshape how we as men have been taught to act and behave. We need to hold on to the many wonderful aspects of manhood and remove those things that hold us back.
We need to stop laughing and begin challenging inappropriate comments made about women and girls. We need to educate ourselves, our sons, and other young men and boys.
Our liberation as men is directly tied to the liberation of women.
Let's be the solution.
A Call to Men works with men and women to create a world where all men and all boys are loving and respectful, and all women and girls are valued and safe.
Help us create a new world by being part of the next generation of manhood.
So Scott, it's great to be here with you today. And I don't like to kick off with a agree, disagree. Normally when I've got students in the room, I like to say, hey, if there's something that we're gonna put on the screen, if you agree with it, give us a thumbs up. Something you don't agree with it, give us a thumbs down. But if you kind of feel it, hey, maybe it can go either way, we do kind of a thumb sideways. And so just a couple that I want to really put up. And sometimes when I'm in a space with students,
So Ricky, let me introduce our students so that we can get them on screen, and then we can jump into that. So
hey, that'll be good.
All right, so let me stop sharing for a second. And then I want to introduce from Kingsbridge, the young people from Kingsbridge. Can I see my people from Kingsbridge? Can I hear your voices? Kingsbridge, can I hear you? I think you're muted.
Calm down.
There you go. Yeah, there's our young people from Kingsbridge. I don't know if you can see the Rick. Stop the share for a second so we can see our young people from Kingsbridge. Yeah, there you go, ladies. Let me hear you, Kingsbridge. Okay, so we got our young people from Kingsbridge on with us, and I see the 4 young ladies, and then we got a classroom full of folks from Eastside House. Let me hear you, Eastside House. You're muted. Can I get Eastside? You have to unmute. I'm not sure who the staff is. You have to unmute. King, we can't hear you. There you go. You ready? Yeah. So we have some young people in the house in the barbershop with us today that are going to help us move this conversation along. Okay, Rick, back to you.
All right, thanks, Scott. So we normally, if you think about it, if you see a teammate or a classmate being violent in his or her relationship, that's their business and not mine. Let me see you, school. Let me see whether you agree with that. Thumbs down, thumbs sideways. I see thumbs down, see thumbs down. All right, and I appreciate that, because oftentimes is that too many of the times that you heard in the video, we remain silent. We don't get involved. And I like to look at it from an athletic competition, how we come together, Scott, how we begin to work together as teammates. But too often as they engage, especially young men, they don't take that same thing off the field. But we need to take that same concept of how we play sports, how we play as team, even in our relationships, when we see something bad happen, it's our role and our responsibility to really step up and say something. So I appreciate the thumbs down. And so I got, what's that, Kingsbridge and Kingside High? Thank y'all so much. All right. The next one, sexual assault is just rape. Agree, disagree. Let me see your thumbs up or thumbs down. What do you got? I got thumbs down. All right. All right. This is one thumbs up, but they changed that. Okay. Thumbs down. That's right, because we think about sexual assault, it goes to some of the conversation we're going to talk about today is consent. Any sexual act that you don't have consent is sexual assault. And it can be more than just physical, but unwanted touch, unwanted aggression. So many things, and Chucho is going to talk about that a little bit later on in the conversation. So thank you so much for that. But we have to ask, as we think about some of the stats that Scott was just talking about earlier, I want to really deal with that the one in the middle, that 1 out of 5 women between the ages of 16 and 24 years old will experience sexual assault. So when we think that's high school, that's high school, that's from high school to college. And so when we look at that, why do we allow this to happen? And when we know this, as I said earlier, that the majority of this is taking place by the hand of men. And that's our role at a call to men, to engage men to understand our role. How do we reduce, how do we eradicate this violence? But when we look at this, the majority of men are not violent, but they're silent about the abuse. That's what I said earlier. What is our role by getting involved? If we see a classmate doing something, what is our role by getting involved? I like to say, if my outstretched arms represented all men, there's a small percentage of men and boys who are abusive, but then there's the rest of us. But what we have to think about is, for the rest of us, what is our relationship to the small percentage of men? Now, y'all, I want you to think about it. Y'all ever play tug of war? And, when you're out on, doing physical ed or anything. Well, back in Jerry days and Scott days, we all played tug of war. And when we think about tug of war, if you think about, if I say the small amount of guys, then we had this large group. And I don't like to put it in tug of war. If we had, let's say, me and Scott, and we were against all the rest of y'all would probably say, and I'll say, can me and Scott beat you guys? And everybody would probably what? You shaking your heads no, right? You say, hey, you can't beat us because there's too many of us. And so when I think about, when we think about the small percentage of men, then there's the rest of us. And I say, well, why do you think, when you think about there are more numbers of the rest of y'all that you can beat us? And oftentimes we say because there's strength in numbers. But when we take it back to men's violence against women, the small minority of men that I was telling you about, or men and boys, we're the ones who are wreaking all this havoc. We're the ones, if we think about this 1 out of 5 number, that would be sexual assaulted. We're wreaking all this havoc, but we're doing it in the presence of the rest of us men. And so we have to say, what is it about us that allows this to take place? And it really begins in the journey from boyhood to manhood. What society teaches us at a very early age of what it means to be a man. How you're being treated as young women, we've been taught as boys how to treat you. What we like to call the collective socialization of manhood. And one thing that we're taught at a very early age is how to distance ourselves from the experiences of women and girls. We teach boys at a very early age that, that girls can show emotions, that girls can cry, that boys can't, that we have to keep our emotions locked in, that we always have to be tough, always have to be strong. There's a video I showed sometime of a little baby about 2 or 3 years old who's getting his shots. And his dad is telling him, he's 2, maybe 3 years old, that big boys don't cry. And he keeps telling him, be a man, be a man. At that early age, he's not a man at that particular time. But I say, now, if you add a caveat to that, he would have a little sister and she was getting hers, then dad would allow her to cry. So what are we teaching that boy at that early age? All right. Think about this picture here. What are we teaching boys on their way to manhood? When we telling them to lock down their emotions, we tell them that girls can cry, boys can't. We're teaching them that boys are strong and girls are weak, that boys are tough and girls are soft. We're teaching them at a very early age that that not to care about the experiences of women and girls. At a very early age, we're telling them that we can't show emotions except anger. That's why you see boys, they're allowed to punch a wall or kick a chair, but we tell boys they can't cry. So as we think about this, is that how we define manhood is how we distance ourselves from the experience of women and girls. It doesn't allow us to be our authentic selves. But also, in order to distance ourselves, we have to develop what we call a lack of interest. So when you see boys don't care about what's going on in the individual lives of girls, it's because we're taught at that very early age to develop that true lack of interest. All right, to develop a lack of interest. And so the next thing is, but we teach these boys, we teach them at an early age is that that girls are less value. When we teach them that boys have to be tough, but girls are weak and girls are soft, we're teaching them that girls are less value. But also we're teaching them that they're the property of men. But also this whole equation is we teach them how to objectify women. So think about that little boy. We're teaching him how to distance himself from the experience of women and girls at an early age. But all of a sudden, when he comes around 11 or 12 years old, he begins to develop an interest again. And sometimes that's around 9 or 10, and some of the stuff he's watching on the computer or on his cell phone. And we teach him how to objectify women, that women are objects, mainly sexual objects. And all those things right there leads to men's violence against women. But what we teach at our call to men is, and we're going to get the conversation in a minute, that when we think about how we've been socialized from boys up, this is what causes all this violence. When you look at this pyramid, don't look at it as a hierarchy. Just think about the different types of violence up there. But what we do know is that if we can crumble that foundation, which is that collective socialization of manhood, the man box, then we can eradicate some of all those other things up there. Chucho, you want to jump in and talk about porn?
Yeah, thank you, Ricky. Yeah, I'd love to jump in here. We just like to mention too, this pyramid in no way is like a hierarchy, right? We're just thinking about all these things that exist within our culture today as a result of that collective socialization, right? So just wanted to and when we think about porn, that is part of that socialization when we think about media and how media goes hard in like really socializing us and influencing us in how we view the world around us, right? And when we're thinking about porn, I don't know what your thoughts are about like how early, right, people are exposed to porn, right? And so I would like to ask that, right? Like how early do you all think people are exposed to porn, right? It happens at a very, very young age, right? And what that does to the mind in terms of like unrealistic expectations, right? When we think about sex, when we think about sexual activity, sexual acts, and so it's a very warped perception in terms of how we engage in relationships, right? And so that socialization, and when we think about porn, that's explicit porn, but then also all the ways that we're being socialized in the media, in what was mentioned earlier by Hannah, right? Like when we think about rape culture, right? There's expectations aligned with entitlement, right, to women's bodies, women and girls' bodies when it comes to this collective socialization, right? So I don't know, we could advance to the next slide. And I think this is really important when we think about sexual assault, looking at this, because sometimes the pushback when we have conversations around sexual assault is that, well, there's kind of a gray area, or I wasn't sure. And I think we need to be reminded that there's a very clear line, right? If we're talking about consent, right? And part of that is that there's clarity, there's enthusiasm, and it's ongoing, right? Those are really, really important things when we're talking about consent. And there really isn't a gray area, right? And just understanding, right, like what those boundaries are for ourselves, and where the root of this is, right? When we think about that collective socialization, is at the root of why so much harm, abuse, and violence is happening, right? So just looking at this piece here, for me, what Denim Day does, and even this month of April, right, Sexual Assault Awareness Month, what it does is that it invites us to look at the culture that we're living in, right? And a lot of it has to do with victim blaming, right? When we think about why is sexual assault happening, oftentimes we point the finger at women and girls, right? Well, what was it that they were doing? What was it that they were wearing? Where were they at? What were their behaviors like? right? And that's part of the ways that we've been socialized, right? To view women and girls of less value, sexually objectifying them, right? And those are embedded in our culture today, right? And so this is an opportunity for us to explore that and push back on that, right? Like what is our role, right, as men, male identified folks, to push back on that and have conversations to shift it towards a culture of awareness that it's not folks that are experiencing the violence, right? But it's folks that are perpetuating that violence, right? And so what is our role in having those conversations and providing that education, right? Because there's a lot of victim blaming that is happening. And in fact, that's actually what defines, as Jerry was speaking to earlier, right? Denim Day. It was that act of, I mean, at the Supreme Court level, right? They're victim blaming, right? So it's an opportunity for us to have those conversations. You could advance a slide. And so for us, it's important to kind of just like lay it out, right? And look at the different forms of how consent and coercion shows up in our culture, right? And when you combine this, right, like with everything else that Ricky was talking about, in the collective socialization of men, or what we call the man box, right? It is a very scary and dangerous world that we're living in, right? But this is an opportunity to share, right? To share this information and to even advocate. We know that there's so many people in our communities that are advocating using art as an expression, right? To talk about what consent really means, right? And demonstrate that, right? And doing that, on a national, international level. But yeah, so if you could see these, right? This is like the lack of consent, right? And always taking into consideration those power dynamics that exist, right? Because that has everything to do with consent as well. Could advance to the next slide. And how it exists, thank you for that, Ricky, just like how it exists on multiple levels, right? So it's not just an in-person thing, but the world that we live in today, right? With so much technology, access to social media, and even when we think about consent in social media, right? What that means and what we're sharing, and how we should go about sharing those things. There's a lot of acts that happen with no consent whatsoever, whether we're sharing pictures, whether we're sharing messages of someone else exposing people in our communities without having any type of consent whatsoever. And we know what that looks like, unfortunately, right? And probably young people have an understanding of what that looks like, since you have more access to different types of social media outlets, right? So just making sure that there's boundaries within that world as well, right? We could advance to the next slide. Rick, I'm not sure if you wanted to speak to this, Ricky, but like what I wanted to say about this curriculum that we have with the Call to Men, this is a tool that's like accessible to all of you, right? You could find it on our website, but we have sessions. I think it's the seventh session right now, that because we're in the middle of revising this curriculum, but there's a session, right, where we really unpack not only sexual assault but sexual harassment, right, and how that's again rooted in the collective socialization. And there's like these real basic myth busters, right, in there when we're talking about sexual assault, and a lot of those are rooted in like what and victim blaming, again, like getting a clear understanding of what that means, right? And so we really encourage this. This is a really good guide and a good resource in sharing and how to educate one another and how to have those conversations, right? I don't know if you wanted to add to that, Ricky.
Yeah, I appreciate that too, Joe. And because one of the big things is that we've been using this curriculum. We piloted about 8 years ago when we first piloted it. we did a pre and post test for 300 boys from different demographics from around the country, middle and high school boys. And this is, what they believe. They believe that 41% in the pretest believe that once they begin sexual activity, that the other person have the right to change their mind. And Chucho said something earlier about consent, that it's ongoing, that you have the right to change your mind at any time, and anytime you change your mind from that point on, if the person doesn't stop, that's sexual assault. Also, we also saw that 81% admitted not knowing what consent meant. So when you saw that number, those stats that Scott was talking about earlier, the stat that we had up earlier, as we think about this, that one in five women will experience sexual assault. That was the reason why. But with our curriculum, we were able to flip those numbers. So as I think about, as we see, that's high school age. Do we have a problem on college campuses? Yes, that's because they leave high school and go to college. Do we have a problem in the military? Yes, they leave high school and go to the military. Do we have a problem in general society? Yes. And so this is why this curriculum is so important. As Chucho said, it's a free curriculum on our website. And actually, we're doing more work around the country to really get this curriculum in more hands. And it's a free curriculum as well.
So Ricky, can we pause for a second? Because I don't want to leave the young people out, and I know we have some there, and I seen some thumbs up and actually I saw a thumb. When everybody had the thumbs down, I actually saw somebody put the thumb up, and I think it was somebody from Kingsbridge. So that already told me that there's somebody out there already who's not really feeling this conversation already. So I think it was somebody from Kingsbridge. I don't want to call them out, but let me just ask the young people, so far what you heard, what does consent mean to you? When you hear consent in your world, what does consent mean to you? And I really like to find out whether the folks from Eastside House or the young ladies that we have in Kingsbridge, what does consent mean to? Oh, I see a hand up. Okay, go ahead. From I think it's Kingsbridge. I see a young lady have a hand up. What does that mean to you when you hear that word consent? Go ahead. Okay, go ahead. I hear you. Oh, we're waiting for you to speak. Yeah.
You have to unmute yourself, ladies.
Yeah. There you go. We can hear you now. Okay, go ahead and say your piece.
The question was, what does consent mean to us, right?
Yeah.
Well, for me personally, I feel like consent implies that both parties agree with an idea. And if there isn't mutual agreement, something's wrong.
So it's an idea.
Well, yeah. If you propose, yeah. You're just gonna no. Not no. Why no? No. Why no? Why no?
Because consent, yes, it's the agreement from both parties, but it wouldn't be an idea of it. It would have to it would have to be set in stone that certain thing is okay for y'all to go. You can't say it's an idea of something because that shows that it's not complete. They aren't solidified. So it's not. It doesn't still stand with consent. It would have to be set in stone that's more of a decision than an idea. Yes. Okay.
No, and listen, and I want everybody. I don't want anybody to feel that your question or your understanding is not valid. We're here to help teach and learn, and be able to get everybody on the best page possible. Jerry, you want to add something to that?
Actually do. It's actually a dope spin-off. First off, I appreciate you guys for just raising that question, and I love the answer that you all gave. I'm actually gonna speak to it from the other side, from the male perspective, right? So I'm a girl dad, got a daughter. We've had that conversation, and I've also brought in some of my nephews and just other men, and we had a group conversation. And so when the Me Too movement, I'm gonna bring that into the mix. One of the pushback. So I'm giving this to Hannah, Choco. I hope I said it right, and Ricky, right? One of the pushbacks that I got from the guys was, I don't know how to speak to a girl. I don't even know what that means because everything's gonna be taken out of context and I'm gonna get in trouble. So I'm just not gonna talk to a girl, right? And that's the stereotype. Well, that's not the case. So I swing this backwards. I'm gonna springboard exactly what the lady said. How does a young man receive consent and then speak to it to navigate that space. So one of this parts is just raising the men. So what are best practices as relates to men, and what does that look like? Just to speak to some pushback that we hear out there.
One of our panelists want to jump on it?
Just for any of the panelists.
Yeah. Hannah, do you want to go first? Well, one of the things is that, and I appreciate that question, Jerry, because we have to think about in this whole man box how we have been socialized to even what it means to be a man. We think we've been taught that our manhood is based upon how many women we're dating, whether we've had sex or not. So that's all defined, within manhood. And the next thing of it is too is that we haven't been taught to receive no. And we haven't even been taught how to even ask for consent. And we've been taught that sometimes that no is not a rejection of you as an individual. It's just that that person is not ready to have sex yet. And it doesn't make you a man because you've had sex. So that's part of, that's one of the myths. And I think Chucho said it best is that even in the Live Respect manual, there's a lot of myths out there. And the next thing too, and I want the young women on this call to realize, as I talked about that 41% saying the other person have the right to change their mind, consent, what Chucho said, is ongoing. And just because you gave consent today doesn't mean that a person have consent tomorrow. And you may have consented. One of the things that, and I just want to teach you some of the crazy things that we've been taught as men. I know some folk probably going to start shaking their heads on the call, but some men out there feel like because I take you out and buy you dinner, then that's consent to have sex. And that's not. Or because I take you on a date, that's consent to have sex. And it's not. Or just because we're watching a movie that's romantic, then that's consent to have sex, but it's not. As Chucho said earlier, consent is an enthusiastic yes. It's not someone who pressures you into it, someone who wears you down, that coercion, but it's something I really want to do. So I appreciate how you two really kind of grapple back and forth, and others say, no, it's not an idea, it has to be something written in stone. Because having sex is not an idea. It's your body. You have the right over your body. And you don't want someone to coerce you into doing something that you're not ready to do yet. So it has to be that enthusiastic yes.
And Ricky, I see that there's a little conversation going on down there at Eastside House. I want to bring them in because I see two young men at the table, and it looks like they have something to say about this. So we brothers, we want to hear from you. Go ahead, down at Eastside House. Go ahead and let me hear what you got to say. Either one of you.
Yeah, I see you with the white t-shirt. We talking to you.
Right. We calling you out now.
That's right.
Yeah.
I have been asking them kind of like separately, just like in our group as a whole, what consent means to them and what they define consent to be. And they also just had a lot of input. So especially these two. So go ahead.
Okay, so I said about consent, I feel like it's more than a yes or no because there's a lot of factors to it. And my number one factor is comfortability. Because again, they could say yes, but their body language could say no, and I think they could feel under pressure, reassurance, like you said, reassure them and everything. Because again, comfortability is the number one step.
What I was saying, like, she had asked a singular question, and that question was whether or not how you know if you got consent enough. And I said a verbal response is not really sufficient enough because just a verbal response could have external factors that are affecting that response initially. So it has to be more physical. Like the other person has to yearn for it. It can't just be one person.
I see some folks back at that back table back there. I want to get some of that conversation, that back table back there. Yeah, the brother in the white hoodie. I see you back there.
I'll get them to respond. Just give me like 2 minutes. Keep going.
If they're without consent.
And Hannah, I love what they're saying because that's one of the things that Scott was saying about, that enthusiastic yes. And enthusiastic because even with the body language, because someone can say a verbal, but yes, that's not enthusiastic. Or if they say yes and their body language is closed. then that person is not really giving consent. And just because a person didn't say no doesn't mean yes. And so there's so many really things that goes in consent. And Chucho also said, and constantly checking in, because you may have had that consent at the very beginning, but if I'm with that person and I see their body language is beginning to be frigid and cold, you need to check in, so that that constant checking in. And I just want you to know is that on either party, whether you male identified, female identified, gender non-conforming, that at any time you have the right to say no. You have the right to say no.
Yeah, I mean, Ricky, you hit all the points, a lot of the points, and I think so did the young people who spoke up. And I think what you're saying about enthusiastically given, but also really important is the agreement part. So it's not a one-sided thing. So I think the way the question was posed makes sense, because I'm sure we get that feedback too, Jerry. But I think it's not about what they're doing, or it's a it doesn't even have to be sex. It could be physical closeness. It's about how two people are engaging with each other, which is two people engaging with each other. So I know that if anything, I bet I'm going to say for some young people, they're going to be better at this than people in my generation, because we're starting to normalize the fact that we should be talking about these things when it was never talked about. It wasn't, nobody in my high school was inviting me to anything like this. But it's ongoing, it's reversible, it's listening to each other, which I think, I don't remember, I think it was the first student who mentioned, sort of, it might be body language might come into effect. So could the influence of drugs or alcohol. So I think what's exciting about this conversation is there's plenty of opportunity to talk about it. And I love that you all are here. We actually do, for the teachers and facilitators here in New York City, we have a toolkit that we're just finalizing that includes consent posters that lay this all out and give some other resources that you can put up in your classrooms and in community centers to also, as an organization, normalize the conversation. So if a teacher is putting that up on a wall that we're going to talk about this, I think that's going to invite more people in that organization, in that school community, to know that this is an okay thing to talk about. And it's actually a critical thing to talk about.
Scott, if I could jump in real quick, I want to follow something up with Hannah and Chucho. I know, Hannah, we've been talking about a lot of social risk factors. Are there any systemic risk factors that are out there? There are any barriers that are keeping us from really highlighting a level of awareness that we can break down that go beyond just the social aspect or the social norms of it? Are there any systemic stuff that, one, we should be aware of, and there's actually being work or best practices doing to break those down?
Yeah, I'm going to answer quickly and then go to Kingsbridge, because I like that I see a hand up there. But I would say in some ways what's exciting about prevention work and talking to young people and having these conversations is that definitely a lot of structural and systemic inequities and barriers to accessing help and services. There's just no question that we could have a much longer conversation about that. But I think that's what's exciting about finding and lifting up and advocating for funding to bring this kind of programming to more classrooms, and also creating schools that integrate more social emotional learning, for example, to everybody, so that we can reduce the access problem down the road. That's my simple answer, but it's a great question.
So young ladies at Kingsbridge, you have a question? Let's unmute and let's hear it.
Sure. While you guys were discussing, we were having an internal debate around consent. And one of the things that came up, we were just saying about in a lot of the music, it always talks about drugs and alcohol in regards to sex. And so one of the questions that came up was, can you consent to sex while high or under the influence of alcohol? Does that change the the parameters around consent? Because you're drunk.
Let me give that to Chucho. You want Chucho, jump on that one. I'll leave it to you. Go ahead.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we had it up on one of our slides, right? When we're thinking about how we're able to make clear decisions, right? How we're able, and if in any way if we're under the influence or we're intoxicated, like what does that mean for our decision making, right? So and it's scary, it's dangerous, right? When we think about rape culture, right? Like how many people, many women and girls are taken advantage of, right? Where like things are put in their drinks or things are put, and so, and it's not to say, right, because if you are with a partner and you both have, again, key, y'all said it, right? Key is like agreement, mutual agreement, that you all are both engaging, right? Like if you're using any type of substance, right, and you all have that understanding, right? But even then, at any point, if you decide to change your mind, right, and not give consent, it's really important to understand that, right, that it's ongoing. But so I'm hoping that answers your question, right? Because if your decision making is impaired, right, then it isn't true consent, right? So it's just something, for us to consider. There's nuances to it, but then there's also like that clarity to it, right? So I just wanted to add that. I did want to take the opportunity really quick because I know that there's some other folks that have something to say about it. So I did want to say though to Jerry's comment earlier about the conversations that we're having as men, male identified folks, what that means for us. And I think a lot of it is the unlearning piece, right? So we talk about like education, but like as male identified folks, we're being socialized and we're learning all this stuff. And part of what we're learning is viewing women and girls of less value, sexually objectifying them and viewing them as property, right? And if you were to ask like a lot of us, it's like, no, I don't view them as property, or I don't view them as less value, but all the different subtle ways that it shows up in our lives, and really like, sharing that piece of education to like unlearn that. Like no one is your property, right? And no human being is an object, right? And no one is of less value than you, and teaching about equity and those things are very, very important as part of like our unlearning. And that's like you never arrive to that point, right? Because like we're so embedded in this patriarchal world where we're swimming in it, but we have to constantly be like disrupting those thoughts and those ideas. And I think it's a beautiful thing to have conversations as adult men with like youth about what those teachings mean of the man box, right? Of objectification, less value, and property. So I just wanted to add those pieces to it as well, and then I think send it back to the youth because I think they have some comments.
So, and our young people have some more comments. I was going to go to Ricky. So, Ricky, I know you told me a story about a car. Can you tell me that story about the car?
Yeah, I was actually with the group, and I said, hey, and I was say, hey, Jerry, let me borrow your car. And Jerry shaking his head, yes. And so, do I have consent to use Jerry's car? Yes. All right. And so he gave me consent to use his car. So because he gave me consent today to use his car, so next week, if I see his car and it's sitting out and the windows are down and the keys are in it and I need to go to the store, can I use Jerry's car? Do I have consent to use his car? I'm asking the students, what do y'all say? Kingsbridge, do I have permission to use his car? Y'all unmute, tell me.
You're muted. Open your mic. Open your mic. You can't hear you.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Okay, so I asked Jerry, could I use his car? And he said yes. And so that was last week. And he said yes, and I drove his car. So 2 weeks later, I see his car and the windows are down, the keys are in it, and he's not in it. And I need to go to the store. Can I drive his car to the store?
No, you can't.
Why not?
You need consent.
It's not your car.
He let me use it but he let me use it.
He doesn't want you to drive it anymore. You asked him 2 weeks ago, so if he left his car there and he doesn't know that you're coming to go get it, he might think you stole it because he doesn't know that you're going to take it. So you have to go make sure he knows that you're going to take his car.
Or he thought that you stole his car.
Yeah.
But he let me use it a little while ago, right?
He didn't let you use it this time though. He let you use it then.
You would have to ask again just because.
All right, I appreciate that. And that's the same way when it comes to sex. It's the same way. You know, he gave me permission last week to drive his car. But just because I saw the keys there, just because the windows were down and it was available, it didn't give me the right to use it. And what you said is just right. I have to ask permission each time that I want to borrow his car. So when we go with consent. So I appreciate that, Scott. And Scott, also, they brought up something a few minutes ago about, you know, even in media and some of the music that we listen to. And I wish I'd have put that slide up, Chucho. But sometimes I use the lyrics to Rick Ross's song. She ain't even know it. You know, put Molly all in the champagne. She ain't even know it. So it goes to that question that was asked about alcohol and consent. And when you think about that whole song, there's not consent given anywhere in the song because number one, Molly is a drug that impairs someone and they can't really make a decision. Next thing is in the song, it says that she ain't even know it. That means she didn't know it. So that means that person didn't know what was happening to them. And so when we think about that song, it's rape culture. And so when we listen to it, and sometimes, you know, as I'm challenging people, when he wrote the song, you know, was he the only person in the studio? No. You know, it had to be sound engineer or someone else. Did it go straight to the airways? No. It had to go through the record label execs. And so just how when Hannah was talking about systemic issues, there's a lot of things that we have to do systemically, things that we need to change to eradicate this whole rape culture. And so there should have been someone in Rick Ross, his entourage would say, hey man, think about the lyrics of this song. All right, I see a hand up from Kingsbridge. Go ahead, Scott. I think they're ready.
You have a question? Ladies, y'all have your question? Yeah, I see a hand up. You have a question? Another question? Keep them coming. We'd love to hear.
No, back to what he was saying about the car. Maybe he was like maybe he was okay with you using the car, but like maybe at that point in time he wasn't okay with it. So you need to ask him again. And we was like a whole second ago, we were talking about long-term consent, about how you can say yes to a certain thing and it's fine, like for a long period of time. But if a person is not okay with it at that certain time, even though they already said yes to it, you have to like not go through with that certain thing.
So my question to you would be, in a relationship, you my girl. We already experienced it. Does that mean it's okay?
Well, no, because then that people have like a tendency of being like, it's your first time, right? So you don't like, some people may like it, some may not. But then it's always good to periodically check in after each time to say, hey, do you want to do this again some other time, or would you like to stop right here and, you know, take a little break or take a long break, however long you need to, what's it called? Resituate yourself.
Excellent. Because I want to go to Eastside House. Anybody there?
No.
So my Eastside group, anything down there, I see some people, you know, they're thinking about it. So when does consent start? When does consent stop for you all? Okay, you got to unmute. Go ahead.
I was asking them. Go ahead.
For me, I feel like it just depends on the day. I mean, like I can say yes today, but it doesn't mean it's given tomorrow, the other day, in the future. And I just feel like, again, with the car situation, it's not first to begin with. So the respectful thing to do is ask, even if you asked yesterday, just like keep asking when it's natural. And with the relationship, I agree with what the other people said. It's like, yeah, just because I'm your spouse or I'm your partner does not mean I have to give you what you want. It's not given. You have to respect my boundaries. I'm still my own person. I still have my own thing. This is still my body. It's nothing that you have to just take when you want it. And if you are my partner, you're supposed to respect it 24/7. So that's the respectful thing to do, is ask. Even if we've been together for years, you still ask.
And I want to see some of the others in the back. Do they feel the same way?
Yeah, so when it comes to consent, do y'all feel the same way that Nelson felt? Do you have a different view? Or maybe something you did not mention? I know you said that earlier, your hands. No? Yes? I agree with Will. You agree? Yeah. Okay. A lot of them agree with what Nelson said.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
No, and we want to hear from you because we really want to help understand it, because I know some of the guys are in the back being quiet, but if it ever happened to your sister, how would it feel? Or how would you react if your sister came home and said, hey, I told this guy to stop and he wouldn't stop. But at the same time, are you strong enough to stop when someone says stop? Because now if you want to talk about manhood, that's what manhood is about, that you're strong enough to hear somebody's request and honor it. I see the guy in the middle with the mask on and with the blue one right there. I like to hear what he has to say. Yeah, right there.
Regarding consent, or you're just listening to that? He doesn't have anything to say. He's just listening.
Just listening. Okay, and once again, and I think what Ricky said earlier, being quiet is not good also. We have to speak to each other and talk to each other and make sure that we understand, we really fully understand. And sometimes, and I'm gonna tell all the guys, don't let your partners, your boys in the room, stop you from standing up and being yourself and being truthful to your thought process. Don't let your boys in the room help get you to consent to do something that you really shouldn't do. And one thing that I always try to remember, that's someone's loved one. And when something happens to your loved one, how would you take it? And I know we as men, we always say, oh, if that happened to my sister, that happened to my daughter, you have to call the National Guard, you gotta get everybody in the world, but at the same time, do we take our partner into consideration the same way and in the same manner, that when they say stop, or do we even check our boys when they do the cat calls and they do the Googling at the young ladies? And like today, with Denim Day, we talked about fashion. No matter what I wear, how I wear my wear, doesn't give you consent to say just anything to me. It doesn't give you consent to touch me. It doesn't give you consent to do anything. My fashion is my fashion. I can wear whatever I want to wear, and that does not give anyone the right to go beyond or invade my personal space. Does that make sense to go ahead, Rach? I see your hand raised up. I want to get your question.
Well, it's not really a question more, but because back to the silence thing, you said like, oh, how would you feel if your sister, brother, anybody? I personally don't like that when they say that, because as human beings, why is it that we have to feel bad or relate to somebody when they're a loved one? As a human being, you should just feel bad for anybody who's been through that stuff. So it's just like, I feel like when people say, oh, imagine this with your brother, sister, it just feels like, oh, you have to check them because you know that anybody should be checked. Right. Period. Because at the same time, we as human beings should understand and, not pity, but, feel bad for them, because nobody should go through that.
I also think that, I'll say that consent, I think I heard it earlier that basically with consent, it shouldn't be talked about just within relationships and things like that. Like, if I know I have one student that loves to give hugs, and I allowed her one time to give me a hug, but today maybe I don't feel like comfortable having a hug. You should learn to ask for consent in even the smallest things, so that when it comes to bigger issues such as a relationship or intimate situations, this is a norm to you. Consent has to become a norm. It can't just be talked about in situations like this. It has to be talked about every day and become a norm for us, or just within their schools and stuff like that.
100%.
And I'm really bad. I get so caught up in the conversation, and I know that we have people in the YouTube world, and I don't know if they have any comments on that. I don't know if my engineer, if he has something that came in from the YouTube world. And if you're on YouTube and you want to go to the chat function and you have a question that you want to bring, drop it in the chat and we can bring it into the conversation also. And I'm just loving this right now with the young people who are on having this discussion. So I really appreciate it, but I also want to be respectful to our guests who are on YouTube who are chiming in with us also. So if you have something, Jermaine, if you have something from YouTube, just You can read it into us, or you can drop it into the chat and we can see that. But Jerry, this conversation is reminding me about when we had one of our barbershop talks and we talked about men as being interrupters and how to interrupt this behavior. And there's not always the right way to doing it. I think everybody, we have to be conscious about that. You want to talk about that, Jerry? Remember that work, that conversation?
No, definitely so. And like even before that, just a quick shout out to anyone who wants to check any of the barbershop archives. Just a month before we did it on human trafficking. And just to bring into context what Scott was talking about, I myself was trying to be an ally to something that I saw as domestic violence. And as I jumped in, I was the one who got beat up. Like I didn't know how to be an appropriate ally, and we had an awesome discussion on what does allyship look like. What does it mean to be a disruptor? And so I want to start off really with our teens that's in the building, specifically to the teen men out there. What does it look like to be an ally and disruptor? And then if the panel can give us best practices, see if we on the same page. So I guess starting with Eastside. Anybody, if y'all can tell us, what does it look like to be a interrupter or an ally if you are in the presence and you see it, to help stop it?
So this is Jayani. She has an answer to this. Do you want me to repeat the question? Do you want to repeat? There you go.
I think an ally is when you see something's going up, you're gonna talk and speak about it and tell them that it's wrong. And if you need to bring authority of anybody above or supervisor to speak about it so we can stop it and address the issue.
Okay, I like that. Monse, you have did you have an input?
Yes, it was.
You sure? The question was, what do you feel like how to be a disruptor?
Or an ally.
An ally?
Yeah.
I mean, if we're talking when it comes to saying just like, I don't want to say just men and women, but just being an ally to any group of people in general, I feel like a lot of the time, I'll just speak as, men, I feel like a lot of the times men choose to kind of overlook a woman's opinion and stuff like that. And they think like, okay, I'm going to speak for you. Like I'm pretty much saying I'm going to speak for you. When instead, I feel like if a man were to tell me something, or even my students, if they tell me something that they have an issue with, I acknowledge that and understand that I'm not in their position. So therefore, I should not have any input, and I shouldn't try to basically change their perspective or anything that they're going through, or try to, I think it should be the same amongst men and women. When I tell you I'm having an issue, just admit that, yes, that is an issue. And technically as a man, sometimes you cannot speak on that, and just leave it at that instead of trying to speak. So I think that often happens. But yeah.
The young ladies from Kingbridge, you want to jump in? Do you have something to say, young ladies? You're muted. There you go.
Got it. So what I was gonna say is that for me, what I was gonna say is that as a dad of a 19-year-old, 9-year-old boy, and 6-year-old, I have all boys. So I'm gonna be trying to unlearn all the different things that I was taught and how I was socialized, so they can be better than me and not have to go and learn, basically make better choices and not have the hiccups that I had. What I realized is that you have to, as a man, daring to be different and to going against the grain, like to be like, making me feel like, that's all right. You can call me a cornball because I asked for consent. You can call me a cornball because I don't just force myself upon a woman. And I'm trying to say, I said, because the context of it is just like, as a man, like we're very clear. We're very clear and adamant about what the things that we want. We're very good about negotiating. And so we have to be realizing that it's the same, like we should not be, realizing that power is like, it's not about abusing it, because at the same time, we're very good about telling people not to touch us and to back up from us. And so wanting to be respected. And so it's that same energy, like realizing that same energy you have and like wanting to go for it, you have to use the same energy to be like, I'm not going to abuse my power. I'm not going to use my power in a negative way. I'm not going to force myself upon, and realizing like the medical model, I do not want to do any harm to you, because guess what? I don't like whether you fear, even if about the person, you should fear going to jail, fear your like your reputation gets ruined, like all of these different things that can come out of, like of a wrong encounter. And so you don't want to have a situation where your reputation and your integrity can be compromised, because once that's gone, as a man, it's over. It's over.
Rick, Chocha, you want to give us the best practice, and Hannah, give us the best practices?
Yeah, how did that sound to you? Yeah, how did that sound? That sounded pretty good over here.
Sounded really great. Chucho and I are doing an allyship series right now with the group out in California. And I love what the teacher with Eastside says. We think about allyship is that number one, the first thing we have to do is educate ourselves on the issue. You have to educate yourself on the issue, and especially if you're going to be an ally with someone. I love what the teacher was saying at Eastside is that we can't walk in there with feeling like we know what's best. We have to listen to them and hear what's going on in order to be an effective ally, and take time to build trust. As she talked about, men working, even as we do this work as men working alongside of women, we have to walk in spaces, and take time to build that trust and listen to women, how they're. There was one thing that I had to really learn from my wife, because as men, we're taught to be fixers all the time. And she would tell me stuff, and I said, well, what she finally told me she said, Rick, when I tell you something, I just want you to listen. I don't want you to fix it. And so in order to be effective allies, we have to learn how to be good listeners as well. But I want to go pivot back to what Jerry said about, about being an interrupter. And one thing I teach about being an interrupter is it's like flying on an airplane. They give you those pre-flight instructions. They say, in case we lose cabin pressure, there's an oxygen mask that will drop down. Secure your mask first before helping someone else. So as we talk about being an interrupter, how do I get involved, but get involved in a safe way? How do I manage my safety as well? And sometimes, I love what someone said, is that what Jerry may need to do is that when I assess this situation, I may need to say, hey, I'm calling law enforcement to just interrupt it for that time being, and then get a law enforcement or someone else involved later. So we have to figure out good ways of how to be an effective bystander, but also taking our safety in consideration as well. Chucho and Hannah, I guess y'all want to add to that?
Yeah, no, again, Ricky pointed a lot of the things out that I would have pointed out. I would just say that being an ally, knowing how to safely respond and be what we sometimes call an upstander or a bystander does require, it's something that all community members should want to do. But I think you're spot on that you need to make sure you know what you're doing, because I think that can be one of the biggest problems. And I think for the young people in the school and youth programs here and out on YouTube, there's an amazing resource. It used to be called Hollaback. I don't know if folks have ever heard of it before. They just changed their name. It's called Right to Be, and they've done this incredible stand up to street harassment bystander training for hundreds of thousands at this point, tens of thousands of New Yorkers. It's free. It's all through this wonderful partnership with L'Oreal. And it is specifically in their name about street harassment, but I actually think it's a really wonderful training beyond, like, in the context of street harassment. It could be, we just did a piece for Sexual Assault Awareness Month around what happens in nightlife spaces and how people can stand up and be an upstander and do things that it's not necessarily what people think it is. And no offense to the men in the room, especially the way a man might want to respond, because maybe someone doesn't want you to respond by getting in that person's face. Maybe they'd rather you pretend to be their friend and give them an out, like, so that they can comfortably get out of the uncomfortable situation. So anyways, I'll throw it in the chat so you can get it out to the YouTubers. But it's a great resource, and there's many things like that. But I do think, being a good community member is knowing how to do that.
Shoot, do you want to say something else?
Yeah, definitely. I'll try to be brief. And I appreciate you sharing that, Jerry, and just because I feel like there's a lot of vulnerability in that, and I'm sorry that happened to you, because I think part of the ways that we're socialized too in that man box, right, is that, like, yeah, we're supposed to be like protectors, we're supposed to be like the hero, right, to in those types of situations. And sometimes it's because we're well intended, we have those good intentions, and then oftentimes we forget to like center survivors, right? Like to center like what is it that they want, as Hannah was speaking to, right? Sometimes we may cause more harm, right, by trying to like intervene. And in the later, what happens when they go home and there's like more aggression or more. So it's definitely going back to what Ricky and Hannah are saying, like really developing our knowledge and our skill set on how to approach those situations. But and not just saying that like it's like a situation that sparks off, but again, like how do we play an intentional role in like creating a culture where it's normalized, right? Like how do we have those conversations where folks know like this is the culture that we're trying to create, right? And like holding hope for men as well, in the sense that there's sometimes this idea of like good guy bad guys, right, is like how could we have a conversation with another male that we probably see is perpetuating different forms of violence, right, different harmful abusive behaviors. Like how can we invite them to have a conversation of like re-looking at things, or like as I mentioned earlier, like unlearning some of those teachings, right? So I think a lot of it is that in itself, right? And yeah, I'm even curious to hear a little bit of what like Hannah was talking about, because even some of those situations to simply just de-escalate things, right, is like talking to them and in a way that will just de-escalate things, because oftentimes we're socialized to be confrontational and just use aggression, right, where we could kind of try to meet relatives where they're at to have those conversations, right? So yeah, I just wanted to add that it's there's a lot of all those pieces, right, because it's a culture. And I think it goes back to the that Ricky had said earlier about the it's his business, it's their business, and we're taught a lot of individualism, when in reality, like we getting back to the community, right, that this is a communal effort, right, and we're in this together, as Tony often speaks about. Tony Porter talks about like our liberation is connected, right? So your liberation is like my liberation, right? So it's like how are we doing this as a community, right? So I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, and I'm just a broken record. That all goes down to how we socialize kids from a very early age, because I think you're so right, Chucho, that like the teacher who had such an awesome comment about normalizing consent in all situations, not just when we're talking about intimate situations. The same goes for how you de-escalate things and how you learn how to not let your emotions get the best of you. That all comes down to how we're learning those things at an early age. So yeah, and I would say on that front, in terms of family members, I think even those of us who do this work, to your point, Jerry, who like you're talking to your own family members, I have often gotten feedback from the people around me who are really good at this, much better than me. It's like they actually do this work on the ground all the time, but then they talk to their families about the fact that really we shouldn't be saying to our 4-year-olds, like, you better go give your aunt, Hilda a hug, because that's we're actually perpetuating a problematic situation. But I have tried to say that to family members who are like, you are going way too far. Like, what is wrong with you? She deserves a hug. And I can see where they're coming from, but yeah, we have to shift the narrative.
If I could just, I'm gonna jump in. We're gonna have a transparent moment. Shout out to my daughter, because she teaches me more than more than I teach her, right? And definitely have a blended family. And I remember one of the things, because she's the way she's older in her teens, and one of the things she had asked me one time, because we come from a Caribbean household, and I say that to say, we might as well be Italian. I say that lovingly. We kiss and hug when we meet family members, and because it was a blended household, and it was really introduction to a new type of family. And she was like, I'm not comfortable hugging and kissing anybody. in this space. And it took me back because I was like, no, but this is, and I had to hear her space and realize, no, that is absolutely okay. And then defend her too, because the other side of the family is like, why is she being rude? No, she's being comfortable. When she's comfortable, that will happen. And I guess the reason why I'm sitting here is sometimes we give passes or we let things go, or there's a bias because it is family. And some of the most similar to faith-based institutions, I'm not knocking those areas, but some of the most egregious acts can silently happen there without anyone knowing if you don't uphold those same practices across the board with everyone. So I just want to land there for our youth listening, that this is across family, this is across all things. So just shout outs to you, Hannah. I thought that was an awesome point that you landed on.
So folks, unfortunately, we're almost at the point we need to start wrapping up. I just want to put a couple of things up to remind everybody that we really want to make sure that if you need help, Hannah, I just want to help you talk about this. There's a website called Nyc Hope. You want to talk about it, Hannah, real quick? Can you see it?
Sorry, then I couldn't find my mute button because I was a small box. Yeah, so this is NYC Hope, which is a web-based portal, which, by the way, we helped was created by students at Cornell Tech. So young people helped inform this project that created a way for us to put information and resources for anybody in New York City. It could be someone who themselves has experienced some form of domestic or gender-based violence, but also could be someone who wants to help a family member, a coworker, and you can get information about our 5 family justice centers, which are, there's one in each of the boroughs, and they are holistic service model that allows for survivors and their families to get all sorts of different help that you can read about. And also, you can see that the hotline that I mentioned, 1-800-621-HOPE, is there as well. There's also, if you go to resources, there's a searchable resource directory, so people can put in the kinds of help that they're looking for or where they live, and get access to information about where they can get connected.
Okay. So as we get ready to wind down, Hannah, any final thoughts as we wrapping up?
No, just thank you to Kingsbridge and Eastside. I think that's what it was, but I didn't get the full name, but I don't really care. I'm just always very inspired and invigorated when I get to be in these spaces with young people. And if anybody out there is also a young person or works with young people, get in touch with the Call the Men, get in touch with the city, and reach out to us, because we can bring these conversations into schools and make sure that they're happening on a regular basis. And they're fun and they're interactive, and it's always exciting to be connected with new folks.
And I also want to remind everybody that on Friday, there's a workshop happening with the Call the Men and the young people. Please, once again, here's the flyer. We're going to try to drop it in the chat for you all. Once again, it's from 8 to 3. It's going to be an excellent opportunity to continue this conversation and getting a deeper dive into the conversation. So if you're free on Friday, or you can get over to Roosevelt Island to Cornell Technical, please join A Call to Men, which Ricky and Chucha are part of, with their partners who are going to be here from New York. And we have some other young people who are going to be part of that. So we want to make sure that you can definitely join into the conversation. So Chooch, where you at? Any last comments from you?
I just again, I want to echo what Hannah said. I feel always really humbled to be in spaces with young people. I feel y'all are the experts in your own experiences, right? And y'all taught me a lot today, and just really appreciated y'all bringing your voice into the space, because it's important to do that. The last thing I just wanted to say is, and again, I feel like the young people know this, and just for us and for it to be said, is how important it is to listen and believe, right? The women and girls in our lives, listen and believe survivors, right? And that could take us a very long way in shifting this culture. right? But I truly appreciate each and every one of you again.
All right, my young ladies from Kingsbridge, you have any last comments for us? Kingsbridge, you have any last comments? Did you enjoy it? We can't hear you.
I would say this was very informative, and I feel like I picked up some things that I didn't understand, but I feel like some concepts that I didn't understand in the past have been cleared up.
Do you think this would be helpful to bring it to the program for the other peers that didn't get a chance to hear this this conversation?
Definitely. Yes. I think our school needs this.
Very. Oh my gosh.
Let me finish. The school needs this in general.
I'm so sorry.
No, you're being honest. This is real. This is what they want, right, Scott? This is what you want.
No, we do. Because listen, we get paid to deliver things that you need. So if this is a subject matter that you need, we want to be able to deliver it to you. Okay. So we should definitely look at some way that we can continue this conversation for you all, and maybe you young ladies can be trained. I think there's some Hannah. I think there's some people that and speak of Hannah. There's a group that will actually train these young ladies to be teachers and advocates of the program. Correct?
Yeah, one of those. There's a program called the RAP program, which is it's high school specific, but there's also a really amazing organization, and some of the folks from there too, the One Love Foundation, and they have some peer training programs, and their content is free and amazing and awesome, and they do have student programs, including in the summer. I myself have some young people who I live with who I'm trying to casually turn them towards some student leadership programs this summer. We'll see if they listen to me. But yeah, One Love Foundation. I'll put that in the chat too.
Great, thank you. Okay, East Side, how you doing out there? Did you all enjoy yourselves? Yeah. So we need to do a couple more workshops. Are there some people there that missed this conversation who should be in it next week? Yeah. I see a lot of head shaking. I missed the last part. What'd you say?
They said thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. And once again, please tell your program managers. I mean, seriously, tell your program managers these type of conversation workshops that you want, and we can find a way of getting these programs to you, to the young people. That's what we're here for. So I'm going to wrap it up with Rick. I'm going to give you the last word before Jerry and I sign off. Rick, you still there? Oh, I think Rick. Did Rick get knocked off?
No, Jerry. Scott's still here. Just had to step away for a quick second. I'm actually traveling today. I'm actually in Wyoming. I had a knock at my door in my hotel door. But I want to echo Hannah and Chucho. It was just great being in the presence of these young people. And I love how they got involved in the conversation. It just really just made me feel good because as Chucho said, you were the experts, and I love how you challenge one another as you talked about consent. And Jerry and Scott were just really great being with you today. And hopefully we can come back again. We've got people there in New York City, so we can continue to partner, continue to bring this message.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate you, bro. And when I get down to North Carolina, just make sure the grill is hot. Okay.
Hey, I'm gonna catch some fresh fish for you and whatever you want on the grill. All
right. Ricky and I have been talking. We're gonna get together. We gonna have our own little time together. So Jerry, man, this was real different. This was I don't know how we keep coming up with these barbershops.
It was good. First of all, you had your youth services hat on. All right, Mr. Scott, I saw you with your youth services hat on. I see you.
Hey, I forgot something.
Yes.
Scott's denim today was really on fire. Why doesn't he have his hat on?
Well, I'm inside. I'm supposed to try to be respectful.
I meant to say that the minute I got on the call and I forgot. So.
Well, once again, as a man, I was taught you're not supposed to wear your hat on in the inside, and I also remind gentlemen that too. That's being a sign of respect. You take your hats off when you come inside, and that's how I'm trained. So, so thank you. So Jerry, break it down to me, man, before I close it up.
Now I'm just in a really great space. I love the energy in the room. To the youth out there that had the opportunity to be a part of this conversation, thank you for your energy. Y'all gave me life. To Ricky and Chucho, Call to Men, we appreciate you. Hannah in the mayor's office to end domestic violence and gender-based violence, I appreciate you. You brought so much value to the conversation and made us all better because of it. I was thinking back of a quote by Brene Brown, who is my mythical therapist. She just doesn't know it. She has an amazing quote from one of the books that I read, and it basically says, our job is not to deny the story, but to defy the ending, to rise strong, recognize our story, and rumble with the truth until we get to a place where we think, yes, this is what happened. This is my truth, and I will choose how this story ends. So thank you all for helping us participate and uplift your story so that we can change the narrative. So I give that back to you, Scott.
Thank you. So in wrapping up our barbershop conversation, we just want to make sure that everyone is well, that everyone is okay, and we want to make sure that you can check in. And once again, check in on each other and making sure that you're having a good day, things are working out for you, and that once again, you really understand consent. And talk to your friends and neighbors and get them to understand what it really is so that they can better understand the knowledge you have. Knowledge doesn't really help if you keep it to yourself. Knowledge is something that you should give away as much as possible. The quicker you give it away, the more knowledge that you can receive. And as we can help in each other in any way, especially about understanding consent, we need to do that. And men, we have work to do. We have to really dig in deep and start teaching these young men that some of the things that we have to unlearn now, we have to get them to never learn it so that they can be better men than we are. And that's our goal right now, to leave the next generation of men better than we are, better than that we learned about. So with that being said, we're going to sign off here now. We're going to put back on our closeout DYCD Barbershop talk. And once again, I just want to let everybody know that we are having a Fatherhood Conference coming up on June 2nd. If you want to find out more about that, please email to fatherhood@dycd.gov. We will send you out more information. We're going to be sending out the registration link to start registering people for the upcoming New York City Affirming Father Conference is coming up in June. So we would love to have a lot of you there. It's going to be a full day. It's going to start at 12 o'clock in the afternoon and it ends at 9 o'clock at night, where they're having sessions for practitioners and they're having sessions for the general public. That means you, that we're going to really want to dig down and hear from you as people from the community about affirming fatherhood. So with that said, I give it back to my engineer to wrap it up, to close us out. Are we closing out?